Now for this week's video, I thought it'd been a while since I did a piping techniques video. So I'm going to be using loads of different piping tips and showing you the effects that they create on this box of cupcakes. This way, the next time you want to pipe your own cupcakes, you'll know which piping tips to use. Okay, let's get started. So the things that we're going to need in order to make our cupcakes is, first of all, I have some vanilla cupcakes. Now I will put a link in the description below to the recipe that I've used so you can find it there. I've then got a selection of piping bags and my piping tips, which I will be running through in a little bit more detail. I've got some sprinkles. So these are the Princess Diary sprinkles by Happy Sprinkles. Now the next thing that I've got is some buttercream. So I've made a batch of my vanilla buttercream and I actually separated this into 4 bowls. I then used some of the Sweet Stamp pink gel colour to colour 2 of the bowls. I'm then using the violet colour, again by Sweet Stamp, and just mixing in a small amount to get a nice pastel lilac shade. Now for my last bowl, I'm just going to mix this through just to get out any air bubbles, but I'm actually going to leave this the kind of creamy buttercream colour that you get just from making it. Now lastly, when creating cupcakes like this, one thing that you might find quite useful is actually a coupler. Now what a coupler is, this one comes in 2 pieces and it means that you can separate that, pop that into your piping bag, add on one of your nozzles and secure that in place. You can then take that off and replace that with a different nozzle. So if you wanted to use different nozzles but for the same colour buttercream, it will just save you using too many piping bags. And they do come in different sizes, so this one is for small piping tips, but you can also get one for larger ones too. Now I do have loads of different piping technique videos on the channel, but if this is the first one that you're watching, I'm going to show you quickly how I fill my piping bags. So I've got one of my disposable piping bags and you just want to hold your piping nozzle up against the end just to measure roughly how big the opening needs to be. I'm then going to cut off the end, open that piping bag, pop the piping tip in and just pull that tight. So we want it tight enough that it's not going to pull out once any pressure goes on that bag. I'm then going to use a tall glass just to hold the piping bag still while I fill it with buttercream. Just pushing that down. I can then take it out and I'm going to twist the end. This is what I'm going to hold in my hand just to keep that piping bag shut. And when I am piping my cupcakes, I just want to apply pressure to this hand so the buttercream comes out, and with the other hand I'm just going to use this to guide it round. Okay, so I'm gonna start with my first cupcake and I'm gonna be using the 2D piping tip. So this is the classic 2D piping tip. It's quite a larger piping tip. We have about an inch opening at the end. It's a flower tip or a closed star tip. So the points come up, curve over, and we just have a very small gap in the center. One thing with the 2D piping tip, you want to make sure that those points aren't touching, as this can stop the buttercream from coming through or even give you gaps in your buttercream swirl. So I'm going to pipe 2 small rosettes on the side. I'm going to hold my piping bag above my cupcake and, starting in the center, apply a small amount of pressure and start to move my piping bag around, creating a little rosette. Do another one of these directly next to it. I'm then going to use one of the small piping tips. So this is the number 22. We have a lot of teeth cut out, so this is going to create a nice textured effect, but it's one of the small piping nozzles, so the opening is only around 1/2 centimeter at the top. I'm going to create small little domes, so I'm going to hold it above my cupcake and just apply pressure just until it spreads out to it's around 1 centimeter. I'm then going to stop applying pressure and pull away, and we just get this little point on the top. I've then got a slightly bigger example. So this is the 4B. So this is another piping tip that has a lot of teeth cut out. They come up and give an opening of just under 1 centimeter. And I would say this is a medium size piping nozzle. So if we compare it to another one of a similar style, you'll see that it's not as big as the 6B. And the whole point of these cupcakes is just to fill up any gaps. So I'm going to go in and just pop a few on the other side. I can then finish off my cupcake with some of those sprinkles. So as you can see, we just have these really classic rosettes in the center, and we have these little domes. Now, because this one was slightly bigger and it had more teeth, we do get more texture on the outside, so you can just pick whichever one you prefer. For my next cupcake, we're going to create a shell or a rolling wave. So I've got the 105 piping tip. Instead of just having triangular teeth cut out, we have these long parts with a little circle at the end. So I always think this one looks a little bit like a turret on a castle. We have an opening of around 1/2 centimeter at the top, and to pipe this, I'm just going to apply pressure and pull my piping bag towards the edge of my cupcake before pulling it back. Now you could do another one in front of this. I'm actually going to go next to this one and just create a little fan effect. So now to finish this one off, I'm going to create another rosette on the other side, but instead of using the 2D piping tip, I'm going to use the 1M. Here we've got the 1M, so this is just an open style piping tip, and those points just come up, and we have an opening of around 1/2 centimeter at the end. So I'm going to do it in exactly the same way, starting from the center and just working my way out. And just to fill those gaps, you can finish it off with some of those little domes. Again, using that number 22 start tip for adding on a few of those sprinkles. Now for my third cupcake, again, I'm going to keep that 1M piping tip, but I want to create a border around the outside. Now I don't want to see the cake in the center, so I'm going to add just a bit of plain buttercream into the middle and just use my offset spatula just to smooth this down. You don't need to worry about the edges, as we will be covering those. I'm then going to take that 1M piping tip, tilt it to one side, and I'm going to pipe one buttercream swirl. I'm then going to bring it forward, and as I pipe, I'm going to turn my cupcake. If at any time you need to stop, you just want to stop as that swirl comes down. I can then join that so we get this border around the edge of our cupcake. And I just think this one looks so pretty, and you can even put a little round cake topper in the center. For our fourth cupcake, we're going to have a rosette, we're going to have some waves, and we're going to have some little domes. Now for my rosette, instead of using the 2D piping tip, I'm going to use one of the ones that has a lot more teeth. This is a large piping tip. This one is the 857, but it's also known as the 1E. We have a lot of teeth cut out, so we're going to get a lot of texture, but instead of them coming straight up, it comes over, so it's similar to a closed star tip or a flower tip, and we just have this opening at the end. So I'm going to do this in exactly the same way, start in the center and just wind that round until my rosette is the size that I want. Next to this rosette, I'm going to create a wave. Now to do this, I'm going to use a petal tip, the 124. So as you can see, we've got this teardrop shape at one end, which measures just over 1 centimeter. We have a wider part at the bottom, and it just comes up into a point. So you want to keep the widest part against your cupcake. So we're going to have that point at the top. Start applying pressure until some of that buttercream comes out. You then want to wind that piping tip back and forward as you move it, just filling up that gap. Now, because we already have quite a lot of texture on this cupcake, I'm going to use a piping tip with a round opening at the end. Now, this is one of the smaller piping nozzles, so this is the number 12. It's got a small circle opening at the end. So we're going to do it in exactly the same way as the other domes, but instead of having all that texture, we just get this really pretty little smooth dome. And again, just add on some of those sprinkles to match the rest. For my fifth cupcake, I'm going to start with a rosette. So again, I'm going to use that 1E piping tip. I've then got a piping tip with a similar amount of teeth, but they go straight up instead of curving over. So this piping tip is the 6B, and we have an opening of around 1 centimeter at the end. The teeth come straight up, so this is a star tip, but it's also known as a French tip. And for this one, instead of a rosette, because it does have quite a large opening, we can create a giant dome. Now, where we have this large gap on the side, I want to create another wave, but instead instead of using that petal tip, I've got the 2D piping tip. As that buttercream comes out, just wave that piping tip backwards and forwards. So instead of just having one strip running through, you get all these little waves. Now to finish this one off, we do have a little gap there. So I'm just gonna go in and just add a slightly smaller dome with the 4B piping tip. Okay, so for our final cupcake, I'm gonna start by creating some of those shells that we created before, but using a different piping tip to show you the difference. So this is the number 22. So again, I'm gonna push that piping back towards the edge of my cupcake and just pull it back. So if I bring the previous one back in, just by changing the nozzle, you can get a really different effect. Again, I'm going to use the 1E just to create a little rosette on the side. And to fill this gap, I'm going to use the 2D to create some little domes. And you'll see, because this piping tip has less teeth on it, you don't get as much texture, but you get a lot wider dome. So it's more like a little star. So here we have our 6 different cupcakes. I think number 3 is possibly my favorite, but do let me know in the comments below which one do you prefer. Now, you don't need to use as many piping tips as I have done. I just wanted to use as many as I could so that I can show you the different effects that they create. I hope you've enjoyed this video and will be able to see some techniques in these cupcakes that you want to create yourselves. And now you know which piping tips to use. If you have enjoyed this video, as always, don't forget to give it a like. And if you'd like to see more videos like this and you haven't already, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Now, I will put links to some other piping techniques videos in the description below so you can check them out there. So until next time, bye!